Hi everyone, I'm Emma Rossi. I am the Senior Recruitment Advisor at EDF Trading. Thank you all coming to our presentation today. We're hoping to give you some insight into some of the really interesting stuff we're doing within data and technology at EDF Trading. So initially, I will hand over to my colleague Peter. He's going to talk you through some of the exciting stuff that we're working on at the moment, and then we will give you a bit more insight into some of the opportunities we have for students, and then we'll move on to a Q&A at the end. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Emma. First of all, welcome everyone. It's quite exciting, although I can't actually see anyone. I believe there's lots of people on this introduction from EDF Trading to your world, so we're really excited. As Emma said, we'll give you a bit of insight as to what we do and how we operate, and we also have a few people on this video who have actual hands-on experience with our programs, and they'll be able to answer some of your questions as well. Hope you can see my slides well. We'll take you through that. I'm not going to bore you too much, but I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we are and what we do as a company. And the background to that is maybe you haven't heard of us, maybe you have. So EDF Trading is part of EDF Group, a French-owned power production company mostly, but we do a lot of other things. As a company or as a subsidiary company, EDF Trading is active in a couple of different countries. We have our main offices in London, Paris, and then the US and in Singapore. So we kind of split geographically, and then our business lines align with that. The activities that we have are mostly around energy trading and energy optimization. So we look at the markets, the commodity markets, like a bank or an investment fund would do for equity and bonds and rates. We do the same thing, but we look at electricity, we look at gas, we look at LNG, we look at LPG, oil, we look at carbon markets. So all of the things that are important for your logistical operations every day. When you plug in your iPhone at home, something starts happening on our end because we need to make sure that the logistics happen in the right way, that you've got enough electricity to charge that phone. So we wholesale trade those markets to try and make sure that on all different levels, we kind of ensure a smooth operation, and we try to ensure that we optimize our assets as well as our own EDF trading books. And that all sounds probably very vague and not very concrete. It's a bit of a niche market in the sense I had never thought about it when I was kind of in your shoes a long time ago. But it's fascinating when you start thinking about how much is happening behind the scenes to ensure that a power plant actually ramps up behind the scenes to generate that little bit of extra electricity that you need to charge your iPhone when you're at home. And of course, it's not just that. It's industrials are using electricity all the time. The trains are running, phones are running. And then on the production side, we operate assets that range from nuclear power plants to solar panels, wind farms in between. So there's lots of different ways that you can generate electricity, all of which have very specific modeling techniques involved that we use on our side to try and manage this problem, both mathematically and logistically. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I give you some examples. So if I skip through our slides, all this information, by the way, can be found on our website. So if I go a little bit too quick and you want to get more information, you can find this on the website. We've got a link at the end as well to point you to the right website, but Googling EDF Trading would get you there anyway. So within the group, we are responsible for managing all the power output. So we're the direct access to the markets. So EDF Group owns the actual power plant. So they're responsible for the maintenance. They have all the engineers working there, etc. And then that eventually generates electricity. But for some plants, you might have to go and procure gas to burn through the turbines. So what we do on the wholesale trading market is we make sure that we get the contracts in place and that we optimize across that value chain of electric production. We help them with their risk management. We help them with lots of energy services that we do. And we tend to be the first point if we want to try something new. So EDF Trading is quite entrepreneurial as an organization. So we start lots of new businesses regularly. We try them out, and then we try to invest human capital to try and go explore new areas. We've recently done a bit of an expansion. We started operating in the Japanese power market, which we all think is very exciting because it's very new to us, and although it's a market that's existed for a very long time, it's rapidly changing. They've liberalized that market, and new entrants are now allowed, and we've launched that business very recently. So we do that. Optimization is really across the whole electric value generation chain. So we try to optimize all our fuels. So we might have plants that run on coal. We might have nuclear plants. We might have wind farms. So if there's lots of wind available, we will make sure that we get the most out of our wind farms because that's good for the environment. And then we try to scale back the gas and the coal plants, at which point we then go and we might have a surplus of gas that we don't need anymore because we won't burn that to generate that electricity, and we will try and sell that back on the wholesale market to some industrial maybe who needs it more for their glass production, for example. It can be anything. So that's the activity that we're involved in. If I drill a bit deeper into what is probably more relevant for you or questions that you might have around trading. What is trading? And I know lots of people have different views on trading, some of which are probably generated by Hollywood. Lots of people have seen Wall Street or Wolf of Wall Street kind of movies, and they usually involve lots of shouting and kind of high speed glamour. It's not really like that. I mean, hopefully I don't disappoint you. Trading is a very operationally intensive task. We do a lot of sophisticated analysis. We do a lot of sophisticated risk management, and we have to deal with the complexities of the physical landscape that we operate in. And you can imagine, if you think back about a windmill that you see next to the highways when you travel through the European countryside, what you can see is that if there's lots of wind, the wind farm or the wind plant will start turning quicker and will generate more electricity. If all of a sudden the wind drops dead, then that electricity is gone. So that kind of optionality and flexibility we have to manage. And so we've tried to specialize in those kind of physical complexities. And every single production point and every single pipeline in Europe on the gas side, or every single ship, if you talk about LNG, has very specific kind of complexities and physical natures built into it. And we can't apply a one size fits all. We really have to go into the detail to try and model and try and cope and understand all of those features very specifically, so that we can put together a very comprehensive picture of what we think fuel costs are going to be, what we think fuel optimization would look like, and what ultimately power generation would look like. In order to do that, we do a lot of analytical work. And in that space, one of the things that we see is that the world is very quickly changing. A couple of years ago, people didn't have winds and or not as heavily installed. We didn't have solar panels on our roof. So we can see our landscape very quickly changing, and obviously the political will to change and go green is something that we see very closely, and we have to continuously understand what the impact is for us. So if a politician decides in Spain that they want to have a new wind farm installed with a certain capacity, so a certain amount of wind farms by 2025, then we have to start thinking, how quickly is this going to go? We need to start looking at what we think the plans would look like, permissions, how they would get installed, so that we can start building up an opinion on when those wind farms will start hitting the markets, because they will have an influence on how the electricity will be generated in Spain, will be transported from Spain to some of the bordering countries like Portugal, like France, and we have to understand the consequences of that on the French markets, and consequences on the French market will have consequences on the Belgian market, on the UK market, on the German market. So we really have to look at all the connections between the different countries, because it's one big system that is very, very interconnected. And of course, even when you do that, so that's the long-term planning, you still have short-term changes. There might be a power plant that has a problem that goes offline for unforeseen maintenance. Again, we need to be constantly ready to adjust our approach. And of course, the obvious one that that we've just experienced is COVID-19. That has had a pretty changing impact on how our markets function, because as you can imagine, industries are partially locked down, shops are locked down because of COVID-19, but then people go home and they will work from home, so they will spend more or use more electricity, they will use more gas now that winter is coming. So trying to understand how that impacts the electric and the gas balances is key. And we've got a few people on the call who are very involved in that kind of modeling. But that's to give you a little bit of an insight into the complexities that we try and cope with. So what does this mean in terms of data? Well, practically speaking, we really look at thousands of different sources that we have. So that thousands of different data sources that we look at, some of which are published by the grids. So you would have, for example, a gas field or gas metering points as gas enters into the Netherlands. We can see that. We can semi-real-time monitor how much is flowing through those pipelines. We can see the output of that and try to then further forecast how that might behave in the next couple of minutes, hours, and so on. So we're looking at trillions of data points, lots of real-time data sources. And of course, for all these things, we have built up tremendous amounts of histories. And if you start thinking about every single solar field or every single wind farm and power plant that you would have, there's lots and lots of them in each country, the transmission lines between those, and you have this for gas. You've got gas is being imported through Russia, also coming out of Norway, is coming from the international markets, which is by means of LNG. There's 500 odd ships around the world transporting that kind of gas into Europe, all of which gets tracked by our data scientists. So it's a very wide scale and wide scale problem to try and solve. So obviously we've got lots of specialists in the different teams. We even have a meteorology desk that focuses on the weather, because as you can probably imagine, thinking about your own behavior, when it's cold, you turn on the heating, and your heating might be electric or might be gas, in the UK at least. That then has an impact immediately on what's happening. So they try to forecast weather in a wider scale, not just temperature, but also precipitation, wind speeds, etc. So lots of different types of analysis, very specialized in that sense. So when we look at that huge amount of data, what we need to ensure is that if we start using that we understand what it is, that the quality of that data is ensured. So we have people looking after our technology stack and after our processes to make sure that all the data becomes centrally managed, but as well as guaranteed to be of high quality. And we're currently very heavily investing as a company to try and upscale that to take into account the new generation of technologies that we have, so that we can also start looking at new and alternative data sources that come in. So one of the things that we started looking at is mobility data coming out of Google or Apple, because when you use your phone, it kind of gives a prediction of what you might wanting to do. If you start using your phone to see how you can get into central London to go to the movies, that might have an impact on the load and the train demands. So we try to use those kind of alternative data sources to fine-tune our forecasts. And those forecasts really is the core of our analytical work. So we do a lot of research and data analysis, some of which is very, very data-driven, and some of it is very, very detailed understanding of the energy complex, where data then feeds into and becomes part of the calibration process. But all these things that we do, this constant stream of information and analysis that we undergo on a daily basis, it's all designed to make our understanding of this European energy complex and global energy complex better. So we really use that for practical purposes, which makes it really exciting. When I started modeling many years ago, I always thought that was very exciting, that what you do is immediately measurable and has an immediate impact on your colleagues' understanding, on their decision making, and ultimately on the success or failure of the company that you operate within. I think I'll skip here. So throughout this process and throughout the last 20 years of history of EDF trading, I think it's safe to say that we really think data is very important, and that we see this only growing as we can store more data, as we can process more data, and also as data analytics have evolved over the last, exploded over the last 5 to 10 years. It makes us better data scientists, and therefore the possibilities are much richer than they were at some point. But it's always been a very core part of our business. But I think the technology around handling big data, handling data faster, is one of the kind of enhancements that we're seeing in our businesses across the board. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of overall insight of what we do and why we think data is important. And I wanted to drill a bit deeper and give you maybe a little bit more in a bit more detail around what projects we do and how we look at things. So I've got 4 topics outlined. I might pick 2 or so of them just in the interest of time. But the first one that I wanted to talk about is the evolution that we're seeing, where we more and more look at real-time data analytics, whereas in the past, let's say 5 years ago, we would just look at large data sets and try and analyze them quietly and in due time, usually overnight, to make sure we would be ready for the next day. But as machinery and the technology has picked up, we're looking at much faster data analytics. So we're currently tracking and trying to analyze in-flight market orders. So in this wholesale trading landscape, there's lots of people doing similar things. There's industrials trying to hedge their portfolio, trying to buy electricity when they need it. There might be speculants trading as well, and there might be other people like us trying to optimize. And all of them are trying to buy and sell power and gas and coal and carbon and so on. So we try to analyze their orders. So we really go deep on so we try to get one step closer to their decision, right? So we don't know why they made the decision to buy or sell, but we really try to analyze how they're doing it. And to give you an idea of like multitudes, we're looking at 50 million messages a second at times. And so that's how fast our analysis and our models need to be able to work to cope with that kind of streaming of information coming through the systems. So it's a very new area that we've started investing in as a company a few years ago, which is now starting to be more ready for consumption in terms of basic analytics. The other example that I've touched on already is we've got a very elaborate model that tries to model all the power plants across Europe, all their fuel inputs, all the demand points for every single type of demand that you would have. For example, all the industrials in Germany, but also the linkage between the countries. And we mathematically stack them into a model. And if you were to ask me, what does this really mean? Well, you have to solve a very highly dimensional optimization problem, because you need to try and make sure that the supply equals demand, because that's where the price setting mechanism will take place. And you need to do this for every single hour for the next 3 years ahead. And so that's 8,760 hours in a year. So you do this sometimes longer, but let's say 3 years ahead. So that's 3 times that amount. And then you have constraints which are governed by all the physical aspects of our markets. For example, you can flow electricity from France to Germany, but only up to a certain amount. If you go beyond that amount, the lines that you see on the highway, they wouldn't be able to cope with that loads. So therefore, there are constraints on that. You might also have outages. Equally, if you generate electricity in an old power plant, and you have to look at that as a bit like a car, you can't just go from 0 to 100 miles an hour immediately. You need to slowly ramp this up. You also understand that if your car is still running cold in the middle of the winter, the efficiency is a bit lower and you have to be a bit more careful. So all those kind of constraints on every single plant, on every single physical point in this very complex landscape creates constraints, mathematical constraints. So you get a very large dimensional optimization problem with huge amounts of constraints involved, some of which are nonlinear. So in order to solve that, we need to be very clever, because you can't actually derive, you could say this looks like an optimization problem, and I'm going to use a linear program, for example. The matrices involved are too big to fit into memory if you were to do this in Python or MATLAB. So we have to be quite clever on how we define the problem, and how we then eventually solve this. But this is really the core piece of work that gets done several times a day to try and ensure that we understand how power prices will behave going forward. So that was my second example. For the third one, I always think that this is a really fun one as well. We try to model river flow across Europe, snow melt. So as you can imagine, in Switzerland, where you've got lots of mountains, and in Austria, in the winter the snow will fall, but at some point this starts melting in the spring, and then this will fill up the rivers, and they've built turbines in those rivers that can generate electricity. So we have a very specialized AI model, which is led by I would say one of the bigger experts in the markets, who's a PhD in artificial intelligence, and he tries to solve this very statistically as a problem, and his forecast methods are really good. So I won't go into too much detail in the interest of time, but this is again one of the areas where we're very active in our modeling approach. And then the last example I wanted to bring forward is, again, looking at all these models that we built and looking at the analysis that we do. Of course, we have to also backtest our assumptions. We have to check if our forecast models actually work. Maybe they're always wrong, and maybe they're sometimes wrong, sometimes right, and we need to think about how do we improve them. And sometimes you can improve them by going back to basics. First principles get revisited, and we do that at times. But equally, you can apply some machine learning techniques or some statistical backtesting to try and understand how your forecasts are wrong, or when they are wrong, and is there any improvement that you can do. Maybe put together different forecast techniques and get an overall improvement of your model outputs. So this is an area which, again, is relatively new in the sense that you need lots of compute power to be able to do this, and that's the area that we have recently invested in. So hopefully these 4 examples and the very high level overview before that give you a bit more insight into what our company does, because it's not always easy. I recognize that from the outside to try and figure this out, and you can then ask yourself, is this an area that I'm really interested in, that I want to devote my career to, and go and explore maybe the internship. And I think on that note, I'll probably hand the word back to Emma, who will take you through how you can get involved and how that works, and what the different schemes are that we have within the company.
Thanks very much, Peter. Yeah, hopefully you can all see that there are some really very intricate and exciting projects to be involved with at EDF Trading at the moment. I guess I will try and be as sort of high level as possible, talking through our opportunities, and then if you have more questions, obviously we'll try and answer them in the Q&A or later in our booth as well. So we have 3 schemes, I guess, to talk through. One is our summer internship program. So that's a 10-week program. We have them across really our commercial functions. So some of those relating to the projects that Peter was talking about within our data team, within trading, energy market analytics, quantitative engineering. And through that time, you'd be one obviously assigned to a department, but then assigned some sort of live project to work on. Often that will be something which a head of desk or department has thought up previous to you joining, or it might be that something happens the week before you join and there's a really exciting different project for you to work on. So it depends on, I guess, what's going to be valuable for us, but also for you. And that's probably something that I would say is very specific to the internships that we have at EDF Trading, is that they are really mutually valuable both to us and to you. We've had several interns work on projects that are still sort of having an impact in the business. So we really want to make sure that you feel you can add value to the company while you're with us on the summer internship scheme. something new for us this year. So moving on to our 6-month internship scheme that we're going to offer next year, that sits across our data and technology functions. So you'd have the opportunity again to work on a live business project, all very much relating to what Peter has just been speaking through. So that would be starting in April next year, running through to September. So a sort of a longer scheme, hopefully giving you more time to get immersed in the business. We assign a mentor and a tutor during that time. So we really do think that, it's a valuable scheme for students. And then finally, we have a 2-year program. So it's we call it our commercial graduate program. That's where you get the chance to rotate across our commercial functions. So usually there's 4 or 5 rotations. And during that time, you could sit on a couple of our trading desks. You might sit in our analytics function or within origination. Again, there's a lot of training and development through that time. We want to set you up so that by the end of that 2 years, you're ready to take on a permanent role within one of our commercial functions. So whether or not it turns out that trading is the career for you, or it might be something more within sales or analytics, we want to sort of give you that overall training to make sure that you go in the right direction for your career. And so obviously for this year's recruitment, you would start with us in September next year, and it would be 2 years through to September 2023. I think maybe if we open up to the Q&A, then we can answer any sort of more detailed questions about any questions that people might have about those schemes, or generally about coming to work at EDF Trading.
Amazing. So a real success story of coming through an intern and being a grad. And then Christopher, welcome. So great to hear your story as well and how you've got to be where you are today.
Hi there. Yeah, good to be here. So I also was on the internship program in the summer of last year, and I worked on the gas trading desk. It was a 10-week scheme in which I did a bit of work for the head of desk, looking at some non-standard transactions. So it was looking at kind of building a standardized manual for some of the OTC, which is over-the-counter contracts that the business takes part in, because they're over-the-counter and they take place off screen, so not through an exchange. Often it can it's a bit more complicated, and there's a lot more features to it that need to be arranged with the counterparty, least of all sort of credit risks associated with deals, but a lot of operational features that need to be dealt with. So that was a really exciting project I got to work on. And following that, I was offered a place on their grad scheme this year. And my first rotation is in power analytics. I'm sort of only a month in, so definitely not an expert by any means in this particular department, but I'm currently working on a few things for people on the desk, so I'm really excited to sort of dive straight in. Yeah.
Amazing. And you've both sat exactly where the students who are watching have been and thinking about where to apply. So what made you apply to EDF Trading rather than anything else that was out there? And Shane, should we come back to you?
Yeah. So for me, I guess I kind of knew that I wanted a career in trading. So first off, anyway, I was applying to all trading roles. So it was similar to what Peter said, that I had no real interest in energy before I got into it. And then once I had the interview, I started looking into it, and then that's when I really got an interest in it. And also on top of that, EDF's a really easy application process where you just have to submit your CV and your personal details, as opposed to a lot of different ones where I was feeling like I was jumping through hoops, and it was essentially another module on top of the ones I was studying for my masters, that EDF obviously made it very easy to apply. And then if you are successful in getting an interview, then I started looking into it a lot more, and then that's where I decided from. I wouldn't say that from a young age I was born to be in energy, but yeah, now I definitely think that if I knowing now what I know, then I think that energy is where it's at. In terms of like all the changes in the world with the energy transition and all this, it's the most exciting stuff seems to be happening in energy, in my opinion anyway, my biased opinion.
Yeah, so I think most of us end up in a career we probably wouldn't have thought about when we were younger, but that's what it's all about, doing the research and finding what's out there.
Yeah.
Christopher, have you got anything you want to elaborate on your on why it was EDF trading rather than anything else?
Yes, so I studied engineering at university, so I come from sort of that side of well, what energy companies do. I studied chemical engineering, so it was a lot more logistic in nature, and definitely nothing commercial as part of my course. So I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the technical aspect, and there's a lot of transferable skills I found that carry through, because certainly if you study a STEM subject or something technical, it's invaluable for these roles with EDF trading, because, you know, as Peter was saying earlier, certainly, for instance, I did a module in optimization. So a lot of the techniques they do in the analytics department, they're solving these huge optimization problems. So a lot of the skills I learned at uni carry through to the grad scheme. So I think for me, it was the case of I was going to careers fairs and looking at different opportunities, and I knew I wanted to work in energy, but something directly sort of logistic in nature, so working at a power plant, it wasn't really for me. And based on that, I knew I needed to find something that was a bit more commercial, and also I could utilize the skills I learned as part of my degree course. And it seemed like EDF trading was the perfect fit for me, because it kind of married these two aspects together really well. So I think anyone considering applying should definitely go for it.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds like you've both taken some different degree paths to get where you are today, but that's great that you can both end up in the same place. And I think it links very nicely to one of the questions that's come through on stage. So thank you very much, Benjamin. So I'm not sure who's best to answer this one, so I'll just put it out to everyone, and then you might be able to say. So what extracurricular accreditations or activities would you recommend that help you break into trading? Anyone want to take that one?
Go on, Peter.
I'll kick this off, and bear in mind that I might be slightly biased. My background is I'm a pure mathematician, so in terms of extracurricular activities, I don't think I had any at the time when I graduated. But I come from research trajectory into this space. I'd probably turn this around a little bit and say that what I would look for when I interview people is really their skill set. I would always look for very analytical, logical skill sets. People that know how to translate a problem into code is very, very well appreciated. So that might not be extracurricular, that might be part of your curriculum, but I do think that's an important one. Beyond that is we kind of look across for interesting, nice people that can gel in well with the rest of the organization. But I think that's pretty personal. I think different people have different approaches to the recruitment process. I tend to put less value on all the clubs that people have been part of. I try to explore who's the person in front of me. And yes, if you're very outgoing, then you will be an outgoing person, but I'm not going to look at your resume to say, oh, you did 5 outgoing things. But I'm very curious to hear Chris and Shane's response to this question as well, because they obviously come from the other end.
Well, Christopher, should we go to you?
So the question is, which extracurricular activities
yeah, exactly.
Should get involved in?
Yeah, so what extracurricular activities would you recommend that students still at university got into that help you break into trading?
That's a good question. I mean, I wasn't even considering trading at the point of application, sort of first or second year, of uni. So I can only really speak for the extracurricular activities I did in sort of towards the end of my degree, and there are a lot of often. Well, certainly at my uni, at UCL, they had a society called Bloomsbury Capital, which was exclusively equities, but it was a really good chance to kind of break into the more of the trading side. They mostly so the society had a portfolio, and you went into teams and kind of pitched a particular equity that you're interested in, but certainly, I wouldn't say you need that to apply to EDF trading, but I think I'd be interested to hear what Shane has to say, because I'm not 100% sure what extracurricular activities you'd need to really take part in to apply here. I think that the cohort, certainly the graduate intake, are a very mixed bunch, and there's nothing you need to have under your belt before you apply in terms of extracurricular activities.
I guess for me, yeah, I can agree that just being yourself in interview, showing you're keen and whatnot. The one thing I did put down was I was in a student managed fund in Imperial, and I hadn't a lot of experience before a lot of front office experience before I applied for this internship. So I put that down as experience being it was consumer equities. I was in that, and then so. The only thing was when I got to the interview, then they were keen that I had an interest in finance. You don't have to be interested in energy, because most people don't know energy before they go in. But then on top, when I was in there, then I pitched them the stock that I had done previously, that I had pitched in the fund, and they were just quizzing me on why exactly I did so and so, and what was my methodology behind it. And I guess it's just another way of bringing other stuff up in the interview. Maybe like extracurriculars, I would say that just do stuff that you're interested in rather than stuff that are going to focus you on an interview, because if you're interested in it, then when you're talking in an interview, it'll come across that you're actually interested and you're keen on it, and they'll get that enthusiasm from you then. So I would say if you're interested, if it's the more quirky stuff it is, then the more of a conversation it is. I play hurling and Gaelic football, and most people here would never have heard of that. So like automatically you have in all these interviews, oh, what's hurling? One person thought I was playing curling on top of the frozen lake. I said it's a bit different to that, but yeah, it's just something that can make you like a bit different. It doesn't have to be that you can create a stack up model that Peter is talking about. It's just what you're interested in yourself, and then that'll come across. And obviously, if you can show you've some interest in finance before you're applying for a trading role, then that's brilliant.
Great, thanks for your insight, both of you. So, couple of questions to go then. So we've got maybe 1.5 minutes, and we just keep the face snappy. We couldn't do something like this without mentioning COVID. So, Christopher, I'm guessing you're in an office and there's a lot of screens behind you, so probably on a trading floor. Shane, I'm guessing you're not in the office. So how can you carry on, how have you managed to carry on doing your jobs and your roles in very different environments?
Yeah, I can go first if you like. So given that I'm a new starter, at the moment in the office is sort of a skeleton crew, so there's really not many people in it at all. They prioritize new starters and mentors, so the people that are training the new starters. So certainly, if COVID is still a big issue, well, which it will be probably for a few years now, but if you're part of the 2021 intake, then you'll most likely, depending on which desk you're working on, have certainly in power analytics or maybe even front office, you have the opportunity to come into the office. But the support network is fantastic, and there's a lot of IT available for remote working. Maybe Shane can talk a bit more of that, because I actually come into the office every day, so I haven't had too much experience with the remote working. Yeah,
Microsoft Teams. So it's a fairly quick answer there. It's just everything is done on Microsoft Teams now, and even I was in the office for a few weeks before the new lockdown, And even then I was doing everything on Microsoft Teams, even though there was 5 of the 10 people that would be in the call were sitting behind me. So it doesn't really matter if you're in the office or not in the office. Everything's over Microsoft Teams essentially nowadays. Yeah, that's it.
Lovely. And Microsoft to here on the event as well. We'll love that plug. Okay, so I'm just aware of time.
Zoom, I don't care which video platform it is. Virtual video platform is what we use.
Exactly. Other video platforms are available. Well, that is great. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm conscious of time and I don't want to run over too much. So there were 2 really great questions that came in on the chat that I didn't have time to. So Zara and Swayam, thank you very much. Maybe if you would take those questions over to the booth. I'm hoping everyone will be in the booth available to answer questions afterwards. That's a nod from Emma, so all good. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all for your insight. Really, really appreciate it. That was very interesting and engaging. I love that. So we'll say thanks very much. I'll shut all these screens down, and we've got the next presenter in about 15 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.